we're going to really look at three things. One, how do we get data for InfraWorks? Where does this information come from? How do we build essentially the existing conditions? Second, let's take a look at massing and development and using a Revit model inside of InfraWorks. And then finally, we'll look at a couple of presentation options for displaying that work. Now, it's important to remember that InfraWorks is really designed for that planning and conceptual stage. And if you want to go out and do, the very high-end animated presentations, you can always go to 3ds Max or some of the other tools that are out there. And depending on how fast I get through this, we might even take a look at it. But let's start at the beginning. Where do we get this information? When we start talking about planning, when we start talking about taking a look at a new site, one of the first places I always wind up is the national map. And you can see here it's just nationalmap.gov. And on there is a viewer that allows you to essentially view and then download any portion of the U.S. Now, internationally, there are other sources out there, but for the U.S., it's very easy to just start digging in and getting some free, easy-to-find information. And I just typed in Austin, Texas, and here I am working in the area about 4 hours south of me. Now, when I click the download data, I can simply draw a box over, for example, the downtown Austin area, and immediately it shows me all the different themes and products that are available for download. So I can get some terrain information, I can get aerial photography, I can get elevation, water, transportation information, roads and streets. And this is all free information. No, it's not the same grade as hiring your civil engineer and your surveyor to go out and find property corners with the detector and turning in a plat and all those sorts of things. But it's absolutely perfect for large-scale planning or for large-scale conceptual design. Whoa, lost my mouse here. Now, the other option we have is one that's built directly into InfraWorks. And I'm going to close this down. We'll come back to it a little bit later. And directly inside of InfraWorks, we've now built in a model builder. And the model builder sits on the very front page and allows us to do essentially the same thing directly from within the application. Now, the model builder allows me to simply type in again, a location. So let's go Austin, Texas again. It zooms in, and now I can begin selecting an area. In this case, again, that same downtown area, a little large. So we can pick approximately 150 square kilometers in this initial trial phase, but that gives you some sense of the amount of data we can grab in one pull. With this selected, I simply type in a model name, so we could type in Austin model, and I can create a model. This uses the cloud to go inquire and get data from, again, the national USGS National Elevation Data Set, aerial imagery, as well as OpenStreetMap highway and railway data sets, and then buildings from the OpenStreetMap model. This is all publicly available information. We're just scouring those sites that are out there, and we're delivering it to you, though, in a model already built inside of InfraWorks 360. So it's not doing anything especially different from what I was doing by manually downloading data, but it's putting it together and it's delivering it to you right in the model. So I'm going to close this now, and let's take a look at building a model, again, from some of that data. And I'm going to just simply create, again, my Austin model, and we'll start with blue skies. So today is the 13th. And when we start InfraWorks, it simply starts with a blue sky scenario, and you can start dragging and dropping information. Now, for me, I always like to start with a little bit of terrain. So I'm going to actually use the elevation data that I did get from the national map, downloaded, unzipped, and I simply drag and drop that data into my model. It recognizes that this is a DEM. It recognizes that it's a terrain information source, and it also recognizes the coordinate system. So I don't have to be a GIS expert. This means that you can use this even if you're very unfamiliar with GIS, with coordinate systems, with geoids, all those sorts of fun things that GIS guys love to talk about. You don't have to know any of it. Well, it won't hurt you to know it, but you don't have to know it to use InfraWorks. Now, what we get when we bring in just the beginning data set is what I call the silly putty surface. This is just a gray, sort of colorless texture, but you can begin to see that we're getting terrain information. And I'll add to that by bringing in some aerial imagery. So I'm going to grab some aerials. Again, these are directly from that national map. Drag and drop. It recognizes, again, that these are ground images. It recognizes the coordinate system. I simply close and refresh, and we will get the downtown Austin aerial data, or aerial imagery, rather. Now, it's important to remember that GIS data is typically on a county or on a city and sometimes even state scale, depending on where you are. So you'll want to limit data sometimes. With InfraWorks, if I bring in, for example, all of the buildings in Austin, there's approximately 400,000 of them. Since I'm really just interested in a little lot downtown Austin that I'm going to develop, I'm going to limit that data by setting up some of the options in my model. So I'm going to use the model properties, and instead of using the entire model, I'm going to use a box that essentially describes the downtown area. I'll get a little bit of the Town Lake area as well as I-35 running north and south. But clipping this area down makes things move a lot faster. You can see my computer's a little bit more responsive. And just for the record, I am simply using an off-the-shelf MacBook, nothing magical about it, nothing, I didn't go buy a supercomputer. I'm using a pretty standard laptop. But now I've got aerial terrain and photography, and I can start adding in and creating some more richness to this model. So I'm going to grab more information, and again, I acquired all of this from the City of Austin GIS website. I find that simply searching for a city and GIS in a Google search or a Bing search typically gets me a ton of information that I can use in that area. So this is a GIS, and this is a footprint of the downtown Austin, and this time, because it's a shape file, InfraWorks says, well, it could be any number of things. So how do you want me to classify this data? How do you want to work with this data? And these are building footprints, and I happen to know, because it told me on the City of Austin website, that they have the roof elevation coded in this data table. Now, that means I'm getting really good GIS information, and this bit is a little bit lucky. This is one of those things that varies from city, state to state. As you work with different municipalities, if you work with different organizations, you'll find that their GIS systems sometimes are richer and sometimes poor. The town I live in has building footprints but has no height information. The City of Austin, the City of Vancouver, some of those other areas, the larger municipalities sometimes, they do have height information. And really what this does is it allows InfraWorks to create a very convincing monopoly view of the city. And you'll see what I mean by monopoly in just a second, because all of my buildings are simply going to be extracted building footprints with some height. But it does give me a sense of information. It does give me a sense of where is the downtown area, where are the tall buildings, where are the short buildings. And you can see very easily how I can get in and see downtown versus some of the burbs, some of the areas that are adjacent across the highway. And we just keep adding to this information. I've got some lakes that I want to drop in, so the water bodies, and I'll tell InfraWorks that this is a water area. Again, close and refresh, and you'll see that the roads just got flooded out. But with InfraWorks, we do present a very nice view of water. You can see we've got some nice reflections going on. Is it 3ds Max style reflections? No. But is it the sort of reflections that I look at and go, oh yeah, there's water there? Absolutely. And we'll go ahead and add in some street information. Now, again, GIS information, simply telling it that this is a road. Close and refresh, and this will process for me all of the streets in Austin. And you can see now I've got some roads across town. I have all of the information on these streets in this area. And you can actually use some of the metadata, the data about the data, that's in these shape files to control things like street width, the number of lanes, the style of road that's displayed. And we'll look at that in a second in a little more refined Austin model. But one last thing I want to do is show you how easy it is to swap out Monopoly for something else, maybe a 3D model of your own building that you're working on or you're planning on putting in, or maybe a 3D model that you found online. So I've got a collection of models in the Austin area, about 35 of them, and we'll take a look at them. But I just want to show you one. And again, this is drag and drop. Just to give you an idea, I'm working with a DAE file, drag and drop right into InfraWorks. Tell it, hey, that's another building. And then I use the interactive placement tool to simply line that model up with my aerial and drop it in. Now, remember, when we're dealing with GIS, when we're dealing with InfraWorks, we're working on a pretty large scale. So is that corner of the building within probably 5 feet of where it belongs? Sure. Is it within half an inch of where it belongs? Probably not. We're dealing with things on a conceptual scale. And at this point, I could show this model to anyone from Texas, anyone who's been through Austin, and they know exactly where they are. They know just by looking at this model that they can locate, oh, this is the park that's just a couple blocks south of the Capitol, for example. It really just takes a couple of landmarks to give people a sense of context, to give people a sense of understanding where they are, what that project looks like, how it's going to impact their lives. Now, let me jump over to a little more refined model of Austin, where I've spent a little time using that GIS data to stylize the roads, adding in all 35 of those downtown buildings, really building up a broader collection of data. And we'll start working with our proposed model to develop on a parcel in the downtown area that right now is simply a parking lot. Now, I clipped my model a little bit earlier so you didn't have to watch me process it. But to give you a sense, this is approximately 230 square miles. You can see the airport south of town, the downtown area, and then all the way out into the burbs and some of the areas that are actually beyond the city of Austin limits, but all this information. Now, I've bookmarked a couple of locations, so this really lets me get in and work with these areas in the downtown area. And you can see that I've added some information above and beyond what we were originally working with. So let's take a look. There's the Capitol up to the north of us, and I've added in some of the 3D models that are available for downtown, and including a building that's right next to the site I want to develop. Now, the gray parcel you see is the property line. You can see I've got some black lines adjacent in other areas, and these are the parcels or the lots that were delivered from, again, the City of Austin's GIS. So this really shows me my developable area. Now, to begin working on the site, I'm going to do some real simple massing just so I can get an idea of, well, maybe where we want to put the building, and maybe I can look at how the shadows of these other buildings impact my site. Go ahead and manage or create and work on this model and start editing some different areas. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add in a coverage just to, let's start with putting a little grass in to cover the whole thing up. So we get a nice green city block to work with. And you can see also, remember, I talked about the City of Austin data. This is a 2+2, and these 2 lanes are actually one-way streets. So using that data, I was able to actually draw the street adjacent to my property in a different way, in a way that made more sense. And we have tools in InfraWorks now to begin sort of a planning process or concept. So I have a tool down here to help me draw in a building. Now, these buildings, we've got a number of different facades. I'm just going to use a real simple brick facade. And maybe we'll do something sort of a nice L-shaped office building. And I bet I'm drifting outside my property line, but we'll take a look at that in a second. With this building, I can simply play a little bit. I can work in different areas. If I wanted to put in an adjoining building or if I wanted to put in an out parcel, I certainly can. If I wanted to start working on the things like the parking lot, I can do that as well. So I'm going to just draw an area that might be my parking lot. Let's just come here on the north side. And because I probably will wind up with a little bit of a pond at some point, I'll also go ahead and draw in a small lake out front so that I can have some nice amenities to sell. So I'll draw in a water area. And we'll just make a nice one. Right out front. So now we've got maybe an area for pork a share, do whatever we need to do, but we can simply just work through this site and give people a real simple idea of what these streets might look like. And I'll even go ahead and run my connecting street across for the parking lot. I'm going to go ahead and drag that in, and I'll just drag that across. And you'll see this connects, makes a really nice, simple area, a road, and maybe this would be a fire lane or we could do something else. You can see my parking lot didn't come in looking like a parking lot, so I do have to use a different style for that area. So I'm going to use a material, a city block material, and I'm just going to drop in some pavers so that I have a sense of what that might look like. Now, at this point, I'm really just playing. I haven't spent any huge amount of time, but I can work with and modify this model. I can also begin to get a sense of some of the other things that might be involved in site selection or in really figuring out how I'm going to align my building. So I have options for things like sun and sky. I can zoom out a little bit, and I can begin to do some shadow analysis simply by changing the time of day and looking at when does my building fall out of the shadow of that building to the east, and when do I start to get shadow again. And I can also change the time of year. So you'll notice just it's a real subtle change, obviously, but this all works because InfraWorks is based on real-world information. If I zoom out from here, you'd actually see the globe. Now, at this point, this is where I simply get the buy-in. I go to the developer, the owner, say, you know, is this sort of what you think? Yes, that looks really good. And now I can begin to swap out or work with different options for different buildings. Now, for me, that means getting rid of my building that was essentially massing. And I'm going to bring in an option for my building. So I'm going to use a new proposal tool, and the proposals allow me to create different iterations. So we're going to use a couple of options here. Let's say option 1. And this allows me to create different versions of the site. I simply create branching points in the design. Now, I have a small office Revit model, and I, again, drag and drop. It connects to that Revit model, and we're going to actually see the full Revit model displayed right inside of InfraWorks. Now, it's going to take a second to process that piece because the Revit models are, you know, a little bit more complex than just squares. And we'll connect that up here as it processes. So I'm going to let that run for a second. thinking awfully hard about it today. Which model did I pick, Alex? There we go. So here's my small office. We can take a look at it, but the same way before, I'm just going to use the interactive placement, and I can place that building anywhere on the site. Now, in this case, I'm actually getting the full civil site, and as I look at this, I say, maybe that doesn't work, but we'll go ahead and bring it in and deliver that model. Now, this is not a small office building, but we'll bring it in and we'll work with it, and you'll see that it's actually going to overlap my lake, I'm pretty sure. So I'll come in here and probably have to move my lake a little bit or move my water feature. Yep, it didn't work very well. But I can look at the building on the site. I can very simply use the tools if I want to rotate or orient that building a little bit differently, or if I need to slide that building on the site to get a better sense of placement, I can certainly do that. So very quick and easy to create multiple options. There's option number one. If I want to switch to a different, I simply go back to the master, and we'll drop in more, and then we'll create a visualization. So I'm going to create a new one, option 2, and maybe this is a little bit smaller building. They looked at the development costs, they looked at that office option that I threw out there, and nobody was a fan. I've got a different Revit model worked up, a different floor plan, a different layout, and this lets me work with a little bit different setup on the site. All of these pieces can be connected from InfraWorks into the rest of the Autodesk design suites. So we can take this directly from InfraWorks to 3ds Max. We can also take this directly from InfraWorks into Civil 3D. So I can take the site, I can take that road, I can take those outlines and begin processing them in a design application as opposed to sort of this conceptual sketching application. So here's my other building option. I sort of like this one. I like a red building in Austin. I'm a Texas Tech Red Raider. I like putting red in a town filled with orange. And this building had a basement on it, so I do want to drop it a little bit and make sure it lines up with the ground here. But now again, same idea. I can rotate that building. I can work with where that is on the site. If I wanted to add more parking, I can do that. All these pieces come together. And now I start taking this model and I want to present this model perhaps. I'm going to use some very simple tools in InfraWorks to create presentations. We've got what's called a storyboard, and the storyboard allows me to create simple, easy animations. Now I'm going to do it based simply on a camera path animation. I'm going to start out just a little further away, maybe over the town lake area. And I'm going to add a camera path animation, and you can see now it just allows me to jump in and add in different frames to create a very simple I've got to make sure I don't get in the way of the building. A very simple flyover of my site. Now, is this going to win any Academy Awards? Of course not. But it allows me to really simply create a view of my site development and show it to customers, show it at the city council, show it to prospective tenants who might be looking at this area. And if I don't like the way that one looked, I can delete it and create it again. I can change the sun. I can add in things like watermarks, for example, because when you do work like this, you want to make sure everybody knows it's yours. So if you want to add in a logo in the bottom right corner so that as everybody looks at your incredible animation, they know who did it, we can do that and add it to it. Again, very simple and easy. Really processing directly inside the computer, making animation, making presentation, really trying to get through that conceptual planning phase faster and easier than ever before. Now, at this point, I haven't published this model, and we talked a lot about sharing this with the outside world. I can record that video. I can also publish this model to InfraWorks 360. And InfraWorks 360 then shows me a web page, shows this model online, where I can allow anybody to explore it. They don't have to have InfraWorks. They can navigate the model. We can include those storyboards so they see the videos. It really changes the way that you can communicate your design with agencies, with tenants, with approvers, with owners, all those sorts of folks. Now, because we looked at this on a city scale, I do want to take one quick more jump, because I know we talked a lot about this meeting and this session for planners. So I'm going to show you one more option where we've actually used a master plan with InfraWorks to begin looking at future development. And this is the Virginia Tech campus up in Blacksburg. And what you'll see is we've actually taken the master plan that the campus has already prepared, and we've overlaid it on the terrain. We've taken the buildings they've already got. We've extruded them to the various heights. And we're really able to create some very powerful visualizations of what is the campus going to look like in 10 years, in 15 years. You can see here I've borrowed some of the dormitories. This is what they are in right now as a phase 1 of student housing expansion. And you can see we've got a proposal here for alternate 1, alternate 2, depending on which set of buildings they decide to build first. I think there was a discussion of do we build mixed co-ed, larger dorm suite styles, or do we go back to the old, 2 guys in a bunk bed type style? But they are able to look at and evaluate different proposals, different alternate developments, right on top of a master plan that's already been prepared, and they can use that to drive the model and to drive the discussion. With InfraWorks, we're able to easily and quickly aggregate existing data that's out there from free sources, from online sources, from your own data that you may already have from, say, your civil engineer, your civil engineering or surveying group. We can very quickly and easily sketch in concepts. We can use Revit models, we can use SketchUp models, we can use 3D models from almost any source to accurately portray design intent. And then we can simply create presentation materials to convey design intent and show what might be in the context of what is. You've got a lot of great tools for architectural work, for planning work, for conceptual design work, all in one easy package that makes visualizing your concepts, visualizing your design easy and faster than before.